Hello everyone, welcome back to the Conflict Zone 24 news channel. Please subscribe, like, and share my videos to stay updated with the latest developments from around the globe. Today, we are covering the shocking and unprecedented events unfolding in Belarus, where protests, chaos, and an outright mutiny have erupted after Vladimir Putin reportedly turned on President Alexander Lukashenko. What was once considered one of Russia's closest allies is now facing the heat as Belarus descends into a storm of rebellion, political uncertainty, and possible regime change. On the exterior, the situation in Belarus paints a grim picture of a nation caught between loyalty to Moscow and its own fight for sovereignty. Crowds have flooded the streets of Minsk and other major cities, demanding answers and justice after reports surfaced that the Kremlin no longer supports Lukashenko's long-standing rule. The nation, once tightly controlled, is now witnessing burning barricades, military defections, and civilians openly challenging government forces. Videos on social media show fires spreading through government buildings, protesters waving Belarusian flags of independence, and chants calling for Lukashenko to step down immediately. This exterior chaos represents more than just political unrest. It signals a turning point in the region's power dynamics. Moving inside the crisis, the interior of Belarus tells a more complex and layered story. Political analysts reveal that tensions between Minsk and Moscow have been simmering for months. Putin's administration, already facing economic sanctions and international isolation over its ongoing conflict with Ukraine, appears to have lost patience with Lukashenko's unpredictable leadership style. The protests are not just spontaneous acts of anger. They are fueled by years of economic decline, rising inflation, and lack of democratic freedoms in Belarus. The capital city itself has turned into a stage for dramatic confrontations, with reports of soldiers switching sides, police units refusing orders, and opposition leaders calling this moment the beginning of a new era for Belarusian independence. The interior situation also involves secret backdoor talks among military generals, fears of Russian intervention, and speculation that Western nations might seize this opportunity to weaken Moscow's influence in the region. Performance-wise, the protests have been remarkably swift and effective. In less than 48 hours, major government offices were stormed, highways were blocked, and airports witnessed unprecedented shutdowns as thousands tried to flee the capital. The performance of Belarusian security forces, however, has been mixed. Some units have used water cannons, tear gas, and live ammunition to disperse crowds, while others have simply laid down their weapons, signaling a possible fracture within Lukashenko's power structure. Analysts argue that this rapid escalation shows that the opposition movement has learned lessons from previous failed attempts and is now better organized, using social media, encrypted messaging apps, and strategic roadblocks to outmaneuver government responses. Safety features, or the lack thereof, have become a major concern as violence spreads. International human rights organizations have warned of potential humanitarian crises as reports emerge of civilians being injured or killed in clashes. Internet blackouts across parts of Belarus have further endangered lives as people struggle to access emergency services or communicate with loved ones. The United Nations has called for restraint, urging both the government and protesters to avoid civilian casualties. But with armored vehicles rolling through city streets and helicopters circling overhead, the safety of ordinary Belarusians hangs by a thread. Many families have taken shelter in underground metro stations, fearing a full-scale crackdown by loyalist forces. The unique selling points of this story lie in its geopolitical significance. For decades, Belarus has been considered Moscow's closest ally, often described as Russia's little brother, the sudden shift in Putin's stance has shocked political circles worldwide. Some experts believe Putin might be looking for a more loyal and less controversial leader in Minsk, someone who won't hesitate to align fully with Kremlin interests amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Others see this as a warning to other post-Soviet states that loyalty to Moscow is conditional and can be withdrawn if leaders become liabilities. This turning point also opens doors for Western influence in Belarus, with EU and NATO leaders already expressing support for democratic movements in the country. In terms of price, the cost of this mutiny is already staggering. The Belarusian economy, heavily reliant on Russian trade and subsidies, is expected to collapse further if political instability continues. Factories have shut down, transport networks are disrupted, and international investors are fleeing. Ordinary citizens are bearing the brunt of rising food prices, currency devaluation, and job losses. Meanwhile, Moscow faces its own price, losing a key ally at a time when it can least afford more instability near its borders. The Kremlin's next moves will determine whether Belarus remains in its orbit or slips away toward Western alliances. In conclusion, the Belarus Mutiny represents more than just a domestic uprising. It is a test of Russia's influence, the resilience of authoritarian regimes, and the growing demand for democratic freedoms in Eastern Europe. As fires burn across Minsk and protesters refuse to back down, the world watches closely to see whether this marks the end of Lukashenko's decades-long rule or the beginning of an even bloodier crackdown. One thing is certain, Belarus will never be the same again after this historic uprising, and the coming days will decide the fate of not just a nation, but the balance of power in the region.